All right, so we warmed up by distributing. Now we're going to go ahead and go and talk about how we factor a GCF, or a greatest common factor, out of our polynomial right here. So there's basically 3 steps. There's really 2 steps, and then you can check. It says optional. Oops, that's spelled wrong. Optional, but highly recommended. This is a wonderful thing to do. But there's really just 2 steps. First of all, when you're looking for a GCF, you check 2 things. First of all, you check the coefficients. Those are just your numbers. Okay, so most of these are going to have numbers and letters. Letters are what we call our variables, but the coefficients or our numbers is the first thing you look at. So you've talked about this before. I'm going to go ahead and kind of back up, pretend that you don't know how to do this, but I know you've done it before, and my kids are doing it in 6th grade, so I know you've seen it before, but it might have been a while. So when you're trying to find a greatest common factor, again, we're just looking at our numbers first. The thing that I do is I always start with the smallest number right here, the smallest term. So I'm going to look at that 3 right here, and I'm going to write all of the factors of 3. So I'm going to make it really easy for you that even if you don't remember any of your multiplication facts, you'll be able to find all the factors of 3. Basically, all you're going to do is, I always start with 1 times 3. I know 1 times whatever that number is always going to be a factor. And then you try to divide this 3 by other numbers. You're going to try and divide it by 2. Well, 2, if you did 3 divided by 2, it gives you a decimal. It gives you 1.5. So that one doesn't work. And then once you get back to where you are over here, notice we're already back to 3. We're going to try and divide it by 3. You're done. Those are the only numbers that multiply to give us 3. Okay, so these are what I call the factors of 3. So we're trying to find the greatest common factor. That means the biggest number that divides into both these terms. So I always just start with this biggest number and just check to see if it'll divide into 12. Can you divide 12 by 3? Yes, 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 3 is what we call our greatest common factor right here. That's what we're going to use as our greatest common factor. Okay, the next thing they want to do is look for variables. And now a variable would have to be this x right here. It has to be present in all the terms in order to be part of the greatest common factor. So notice I have an x in the first term, but no x over here. That means x is not going to be part of our greatest common factor. So if there is x's in both of them, you're always just going to take the smallest exponent. So say there was maybe an x to the 5th and an x to the 3rd. You would factor out the smallest exponent, the x to the 3rd. Leave the 5th alone, but factor out the x to the 3rd. Okay, but in this case, there's not variables in either one of them. So 3 is my greatest common factor. Now, you're not done. Even though you've identified the greatest common factor, we did not factor it out. So our next step, we're done with step 1, but our next step right here is that we're going to divide each of these terms by the greatest common coefficient and leave the remaining factors in parentheses. This really means, this is what I do. I don't even really divide. I kind of unmultiply, or I guess people would call it division. But notice you've got 2 terms here. That means that you're going to have 2 terms inside your parentheses as well. What you're doing is you're trying to find some number or variable that if you multiply it by 3, when I distribute my 3 right here, I want to get back to my first term. What do I multiply 3 with to get 3x? Well, an x right there. 3 times x gives me that 3x. So that's going to be my first term in those parentheses. Then I do the same thing with the second term. I say, what do I multiply this 3 with to get a 12? Well, 3 times 4 gives me 12. And this is my answer. That is factored form of 3x plus 12. Now, again, this is a nice, lovely, nice thing to do. It is optional, but go ahead and factor and distribute and make sure you get back. 3 times x gives you the 3x. That one checks. 3 times 4 gives you the 12, and that checks. You're back to where you started at. All right, let's try another one right here. Again, I'm going to look for factors. The very first thing is we're going to factor it. I take the smallest term right there, smallest coefficient, which is 8. And I'm going to find all the factors of 8. Okay, again, I always start with 1. 1 times 8 multiplies to 8. Then I try 2. Can you divide 8 by 2? Yes, 2 times 4 will give me 8. Then try the next one. I try 3. Well, 3 doesn't divide into 8. If you try that, you get a decimal. So that one's out. notice right here, when I get up to 4, it's already on my list. That means I'm done. I don't even have to check 5, 6, or 7. I know they won't be factors. Once you get to the smallest number over here, those are your only factors. Okay, so 1, 8, 4, and 2 are my only factors. Now, always start with the biggest one. You're going to try and find the biggest number that divides into both of these. You already know that it divides in 8. We already checked that. But you're going to see which one of these is the biggest one that will divide into 36. Can you divide 36 by 8? No, that gives you a decimal, so that one's not our winner. However, 36 does divide by 4, so 4 is going to be our greatest common factor there. Okay, now we're going to look at our variables. Notice we've got an m in the first term, n in the second term. They're not the same, so you cannot factor either of them out. So we're just going to write our parentheses right here. Notice you've got a binomial, so you're going to have 2 terms, and we're just going to work on filling in what needs to go here. So again, I just think of it as undistributing. I'm trying to find something that if I multiply it by 4, when I distribute my 4, I get an 8m. What do I multiply 4 with to get 8m? 2m is correct. And then do the same thing with this 36. What do I multiply 4 with to get a 36n? Well, 36 times 9 will give me, and then I need an n right there. So 4 times 9 gives me 36, and then we need that n right there. And that is us finished. Okay, let's try one more in this video, and then we'll save the last 3 examples for our next video. Again, I take my smallest number. So there's my 15 right there, and I'm going to write all my factors of 15. Start with 1. 1 times 15. Then I go to 2. Can I divide 15 by 2? No, it's not an even number. Then I try 3. 3 times 5. Then I try 4. 4 doesn't divide into 15, and I'm back to 5, so that means I'm done. Those are the only 2 factors of 15, only numbers that multiply to 15. Okay, so when we're looking at this, now we're going to now look at our 18. We know that those are factors of 15. We're going to try and find the biggest number that goes into 18 as well. Does 18 divide by 15? No, it gives us a decimal, so it's not that one. Can you divide 18 by 5? No, cannot divide it by 5. Try the next biggest one, 3. Can you divide 18 by 3? Absolutely. So 3 right there is going to be our greatest common factor. Okay, notice here as well, there's x's over here, but there's no x's over there. That's why I didn't use any x's to be in my greatest common factor. But now I just undistribute. I'm trying to find what term right here, if I multiply it by 3, gives me 15x to the second. So I know that 3 times 5 gives me 15, and we're just going to leave x squared. Okay, then do the same thing for this next term. 3 times what gives me 18? Well, 3 times 6 will give me 18 right there. And that is us finished with that. Okay, so we'll do the next 3 examples in our next video. Stay tuned.